All right. Good morning, everybody. It's Bernard Nomberg. It's 10 o'clock Central, actually a couple of minutes past on a Tuesday. It's time for Nomberg Law Live. And as we do each Tuesday, we have interesting conversations with people in their areas of expertise. And I am so pleased to have my guest, Joseph Goodman, with AL.com, Alabama Media. He's the head sports writer for them. Joseph, good morning. I appreciate you making some time today for us.
Yeah, man. Great to be here.
Well, it's all my pleasure. And as I've had many times, authors, journalists, reporters have all been on the program. And we talk about just a myriad of things. But guys, was it last year? When did the book come out, Joseph?
Came out November 9th.
So about 4 or 5 months ago. We Want Bama, a season of hope and the making of Nick Saban's ultimate team. Now, being in the state of Alabama, the city of Birmingham, and you being a local guy, it's not too much of a stretch that eventually this type of book or the subject would be written about. But you went about it, Joseph, in such a unique way. And that's where I want to start about your being sequestered. I know that every author has his or her own path that they go down, storyboards and so forth. Share a little bit about how you started off your project, and when did you finally come back into the real world, so to speak, into the family, knowing that you really were okay there for a while. Tell us about that part.
Yeah, well, I guess I gotta say, at the beginning, I was extremely scared, of failure. I had never written a book before, or had never tried to write a book before. Um, it's something I had always wanted to do, as a writer, but I had always dreamt of becoming a columnist, in my career. Like that was my goal. That for a long time, that was like the ultimate thing in my profession, to be the columnist for a newspaper. And that's what I do now for AL.com. I'm our lead sports columnist. But an opportunity was presented to me before the pandemic to pitch an idea for an Alabama book. And so I pitched an idea for a book, and I got a contract for a book. It was not the book that I ended up writing. Yeah.
I was going to say, if it was pre-pandemic, there's no way it turned out to be the same from the start to the end.
Yeah. Oh man. What a wild ride. And this week, 2 years ago, is like when everything shut down. So I'm flying out to Tampa tomorrow afternoon for the SEC basketball tournament, and it was in Nashville 2 years ago on a Wednesday when I was literally sitting on press row, typing a story on my iPhone right here because I had left because Alabama and Auburn didn't play on Wednesday night. It was like the first round. So I was just there to hang out, watch the games, kind of do some reporting on this pandemic thing that was starting to like really crank up. And then, it all just happened so quickly that I was there on press row watching like, I can't remember who it was. I think it was like Arkansas, South Carolina or something. And I just had to like write a column on my iPhone. Like I wrote like a 1,200 word column on my iPhone that night because it was just so bizarre. And just sitting right there in press row, went and talked to a lot of Kentucky fans. Kentucky fans always show up to the SEC basketball tournament in droves. So yeah, that's when everything changed for everyone. And then in my little world, I had no idea like how that would affect the book. But after everything that happened leading up to the football season in the summer of 2020, and then with the weirdness that was the 2020 pandemic football season, and then Alabama's brilliant team, it's like that's what I had to write about. I had to scrap that entire book project that I had been working on and I had to, scramble a little bit and write a book in a month, maybe less than a month. I mean, I had done the reporting for over a year, a lot of it that for the other project went into this book, but I had to really adjust on the fly, and that was that was a wild process.
Well, Joseph, the first book that you had in mind, had you already put together your outline or maybe your storyboard a little bit? And then
No. I just done a
was it
lot of
really
reporting.
more?
No, I just it had just been interviews and reporting,
Mhm.
and research and stuff like that. But I scrapped so much of that. I mean,
I would assume, having never written a book, but had the fortunate uh, opportunities to interview and have conversations with many authors and journalists, et cetera, isn't that sometimes part of the process? You may think you're going to be writing one book in this theme and this go down this path, but then something may open up like a pandemic that really sends you down a whole different route.
yeah, absolutely. I don't know if it's like, this extreme,
Right, right.
but I guess, during the course of research and stuff, uh, I guess your vision of what you want the book to be changes, and that's just like the normal process. But I mean, this was just night and day different for me, So
I bet. And it's not a 1,200 word column either. When
oh
take us, take you, the book comes out last November, but take us to the when you sequestered. Share a little bit about that background and really hunkering down and how rudimentary was it for you to really just get in there and do what you had to do?
yeah, yeah, I'm friends with some attorneys, and like, they'll like go in the hole when they have to like write briefs or whatever they have to, like on deadline for court. And so, it, I guess I know that you guys can kind of relate to that. But Alabama lost in the Sweet 16 last year. Like literally the next day, uh, I took vacation and started to write the manuscript in earnest. I had already written part of the introduction, um, and so I finished that, and then I started on chapter one. I had already, begun outlining for everything before that, so it's not like I was just like out of the blue, this is what I'm going to start writing about. I had already planned for everything. The outline developed and changed, as I began writing the manuscript every day. But yeah, I went to this little cabin in the woods. And, for me, that was the best way to just immerse myself in the project that at hand and what I had to do, because you know you don't really recognize this, I guess, in everyday life, but like the constant information stream that gets pumped into you all the time. I mean, it makes it makes my attention just awful. Okay. And so, and on top of that, I'm pretty sure that, well, I've had COVID like 3 times. So, I had COVID fog bad the first time I had it. My wife works at the hospital. And so it was just like, I got it like the first week it was here or whatever. So, um, anyway, I had to just turn off everything because I wanted, and I also wanted to capture the spirit of what the pandemic was like for people, and I wanted the style of the book to kind of have that energy. And so just as an artist, um, I part of the idea and the spirit of locking myself away was like, that's what we had to do during the pandemic. And so I think that helped me get in that place that I needed to be to write the style the book in the style that I did, just with some of that like frenetic energy, and it comes off like maybe just for some people like stream of consciousness, but I mean it was rewritten and rewritten by me multiple times to get to that place, because otherwise it's like free association.
Well, you're probably like most great writers, you're your harshest critic. And were you able to send out parts of it along the way, along the process?
No.
Well, I was going to say, if you turned off everything, we live in such a goldfish mentality of attention span because of social media and whatever else is part of these devices that you can have access to. But you going cold turkey and then just single-mindedly focused on that, I guess it required it, because for those of you who haven't read his book, and if you haven't, shame on you if you're an Alabama fan or a fan of Alabama state history. And this is where I wanted to ask you, did you always have in your mind, even though you may not have started off thinking this is going to be in the backdrop of the pandemic, was the state of Alabama's history going to be intertwined into the story?
Into the first book? No, it wasn't at all.
How-
The first book was like a more traditional sports book. Once the pandemic happened, and just the way that our culture in Alabama and in the South is so intertwined with football, and it's so important, and the pandemic, really brought together like the confluence of all of these cultural rivers, like our state history, football, our dedication to having a season no matter what, the summer of 2020, which was about racial injustice, all of these things like flowed together at the same time. And so I couldn't tell the story properly. Okay. I knew what I had to do. So I had to go into the history of the state, and kind of explain how we got here, to begin with. And I know that turned off a lot of Alabama fans, and I knew that was going to happen from the beginning. But just as a journalist, I knew that's what the story required, and that's what I needed to do.
For myself, there's been hundreds of books written over the years about this season of Alabama football or this history of Alabama football. But you bringing all of these different aspects of society and life together to tell that story resonated with me more than anything. We all watch the games. It's the off the field interactions that we don't get to see that you were able to bring to the pages that I think that makes the book so special. And that's why I was able to enjoy it so much. But was it easier? I don't know if you can separate this. Which part of the story that you told was harder, I guess I should ask, to bring to life? The football aspect, the social, the pandemic? I don't know if I'm even asking it correctly, but was one section of that harder to bring to life and to be able to share than the other sections?
So the book has a very structured, it doesn't seem like that, I guess, maybe for people on their first read, but it has a very structured outline. The introduction is the introduction, and kind of presents the way that the book is going to read for people. And I also made the publisher put the introduction online for free, just so people could understand what they were getting into. So anyway, the first 9 chapters of the book are essentially 3 acts. And then the whole book together is 3 acts, but I broke down the first 9 chapters in 3 acts, and then and then there's a break, which is chapter 10, and chapter 10 is structured with this device that I used. I wrote these doggerel poems to break up chapter 10 into 3 basic acts, and then 11, 12, and 13, each one of those chapters is their own act, is their own structured act. So the back half of the book was more football, going through the season, having fun. Like this was, this was the reward for these kids after everything they had been through, like there was no question this team was not going to lose. They were not going to lose a game. Okay. So there was like no drama to write about. Okay. It was just a free for all. It was like for the love of the game. Like really, I wanted to capture the spirit of all of those guys who didn't have to be there. They could have opted out. A lot of people did in the SEC. No one did at Alabama. They were there for the love of the game. I mean, they really were. They were there for each other. And so, all of that came together in the back half of the book. And I for the reader, I really wanted that to be, because there's a lot of heavy stuff in chapters 1 through 9. And so, chapter 10 is the We Want Bama chapter. And that's when the voice really changes into a more whimsical, this is sports, this is the toy department of the sports section, like style of thing. Yeah. And then chapters 11, 12, and 13 were really just a celebration to the state about how much we love football, but then also to that special team.
It was really like a reward, if you will, to get to learn the personalities of the Alex Leatherwoods and some of the other leaders on that team. You guys, if you're the casual fan or even the hardcore fan, and you're seeing them on Saturdays and now Sundays, you don't know their personalities. But the way that I see your book is 10, 15, 20 years from now, if you want to know what was going on in our state, you want to know what was going on at this limited period of time, this book is going to be a great historical reference to me. Yeah. And guys, if you're watching this live or you catch us on the replay later, I'm talking with Joseph Goodman with AL.com, lead sports writer, and we're talking about his book, We Want Bama. And it really is not just about, it's far from it, just about the 2020 season, national championship team that was so successful, but it really puts it in context of what was going on in our state culturally, the pandemic, civil unrest, and so many other things. When you finished the book, were you relieved? Were you saddened? What was the emotions going through when you finally finished and it was time to send it off to the editor in full? What was the mindset? What were the emotions?
Oh man, I was just so, like, this sense of accomplishment, was the biggest overriding thing for me. And I looked like this little, like, I had this beard, like, because I had just
hadn't shaved, hadn't showered, lost 10 pounds.
I made myself shower every morning. Like I had a routine down, so, but I would only call I didn't talk to anyone on the phone. I only talked to my wife. Like I checked in with her like once a day, My brother came and visited me one time. He lives in Auburn. It was almost like a wellness check is what I felt like it was. Like go down and see if he's still alive.
Oh, that's awesome. That's
great. But yeah, after I finished the first manuscript, it was just like this sense of accomplishment, and I was very proud of myself. The and it became, I mean, I was writing at such a furious pace, that, you know, the last few days that I was writing, I mean, it was really just a joy to do it. You know, I had like this sense of extreme happiness and joy, you know, writing the last uh, 3 chapters of the book. And I mean, my my schedule when I was writing was crazy. I would, but it's what worked for me for this book, you know. So, um, I I would I would wake up at 1:30 a.m. and I would write until 7:30 a.m. and then I would take a nap until like 9, um, or like 9 or 9:30, usually 9, and I would write all the way through until about 9 p.m. and just with like a break for like I would take a walk like in between or whatever, and then I would outline until like 10 for the next day or next writing session. Then I would go to sleep and I would wake up at 1:30 again and just do it. And I did that every day until it was done. And that was a little more than 3 weeks. Yeah. And
Wow.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I turned in 95,000 words.
Wow.
Um, we cut it back um, a little bit, but not much. They were really happy with it. That's the thing. Like they had no idea. Like they thought I was really. They had no idea what I was gonna turn in. They had some idea from my book proposal, but it
Sure.
was like before the pandemic. So, you know, I told myself when I sat down to write the book, I was like, I don't care if one person buys this book. I'm going to write the book that I know needs to be written, and that's the only way that I'm going to do this. And if I needed to give back the book advance, then I was just going to give back the book advance. I
I
mean,
Yeah, I don't suspect you had to do that. In fact, I suspect they're waiting for your next book proposal. But I want to ask you
they are.
two things. Did you say everything you wanted to say in the book? And will there be, and I don't know the proper term, I don't know if it's epilogue, addendum, update, when the paperback, I don't know if that's out yet or when it's time, will you write an update from the story? Did you
Yeah,
say everything you wanted to say? And will there be an update of any sort?
I did say everything I wanted to say. Yeah, I did. But I'm going to write an afterward for the paperback.
Thank you. That's
Yeah.
the word I was looking for.
Right. And you know, because a lot has happened. I mean, a lot happened in the time that I finished the first manuscript to like the last you know, the last chance I had to edit it. So I actually uh I mean, I got them to send me hard like I went through the editing process, and then like the last pass edit, you know, they sent me an entire manuscript like physically, and
Right.
so I just like line edited it. I mean, they hired, I mean, you know, they hired like a grammarian from Cambridge, you know, and they hired a proofreader who's a lit professor at Ole Miss, you know. But after all of this, you know, um, I have a chance to go through it one final time and and change anything. And so I added a lot. I mean,
Well,
it's funny. I was visiting my brother in Seattle, and I'm like, you know, my my wife is like, we're trying to go to Olympic National Park, and like my brother is, you know, there, and it's supposed to be like vacation. Well, I'm like adding all of these notes and stuff to like the manuscript, and I actually mailed it from Seattle to New York that in the summer
you
anyway.
said something great. You had a Cambridge editor or a proofreader, but you also had an Old Miss. You had to have a Southern eye, I would assume, because I'm just envisioning, and this is my, this is just on me. someone from Cambridge trying to identify with the Southern writer's mindset. I guess the old Miss editor or proofreader helped with that aspect of it.
I never heard from the proofreader from Ole Miss. All I ever heard from her was that she loved the book, and like she said, this is a book for the South, of the South. You know,
Wow.
you know, that was the spirit. She loved it. You know, the copy editor. We actually did have some disputes on the way I wanted words to appear based on the Southern dialect. And, you know, I won those disputes. So, you know, like there's a chief production editor, you know, for the publisher, and he like settles all disputes. And so he sided with me.
Well, because I think they suspected they want you to come back to them. But I got a question that just got submitted. Talk about the cover, the idea of the cover of the book.
Yeah, great question.
Where did all that, describe how that came about?
Yeah, that's a great question. And a lot went into that. So standard sports book, you know, you just slap a photo of like Nick Saban on the cover, or like a picture of Bryant Denny or whatever, and you know, you sell some copies, you know what I mean? But this, I mean, I didn't, it's more of an artistic piece of nonfiction than it is anything else. And so, you know, I didn't at all feel like cover of the book.
I got it up there now. Are you able to see it, Joseph?
Yes, I do see it. Yeah. Yeah. So my editor, my direct editor, who's awesome, he knew that the cover didn't need to be like this standard sportsbook cover. Mm-hmm. So he had me write this long email to the art department, and I really explained like the spirit of the book and everything. And I told them, just at the end of it, I was just like, just have fun with it. Like, here are all the elements of the motifs, you know, that the book presents. And, you know, I just want you guys to have fun with it, really. And so the tree is actually a nod. The tree is actually a nod to Kill a Mockingbird. It's wow. It's an allusion to Kill a Mockingbird. And obviously the sign, the We Want Bama sign, is kind of like a double entendre, I guess, to the protest, but then also the college game day signs, you know, at the same time. And then the cup that's the nod to the Yellowhammer Cup at Galette's. And the guys at Galette's like absolutely love the book, which is great.
I bet.
So anyway, that is that's the cover.
Well, that's such great stuff, and I appreciate you sharing some of that background on that. I'm going to get you out of here in just a couple of minutes, but
you know, I wanted to mention the map. Like the map, I love the map. It's such a great.
Yeah, I don't have I didn't think about showing a picture of that, but go ahead. I'm gonna see if I can find it while you're talking about it.
Okay. It's such a great story. So I turned in the first manuscript, and like they had no idea. They didn't really have it. They had no idea I was even capable of writing a book like this. Okay. So the publisher in New York was like extremely shocked and excited. And so like I felt like on our first conversation I had with my editor, like this is the chance that I can have like a big ask. Okay. So I'm like, listen, I got a question. I would love to have a map in the book. And they were like, Joe, what are you talking about? What are you talking about, a map? I'm like, I want a map. I want my own map of the state of Alabama in the book to help people, you know, understand and visualize these different places that I'm talking about, you know, because the book definitely jumps around, and I felt like it would be great to have a map in there with some cultural. So they were like, so you want a map of Middle Earth, but of Alabama? I was like, yes, that is exactly what I want.
Yeah,
And,
that's right.
and so they let me do it. They were like, okay, they have a map artist and everything. And they got me to, come up with all the different like places, people, events, that I wanted in the key and everything. So the map was a lot of fun. I'm really, so you write a whole book and like, I love the map.
Well, that's great. Well, I'm not able to find a picture now, but you're going to have to buy the book. Those you are watching or listening to us to see the map, or I'll see if I can find my copy and make a photo of it. Joseph, before we get you out of here, I want to switch gears and ask you two things. One, are you ready to share what the next idea for the second book is, or is that still percolating? And then we'll go on to the next thing.
I'm not going to share with it. I'm not going to share what it is, but it is going to be really fun. Okay. And it's going to be all SEC encompassing. So I'll just say that.
Okay. We'll come back to you at a future date when you're ready to share about that. But the other thing I wanted to talk about is the modern sports writer and social media. You have a fantastic Twitter following, Twitter account. It's one of my favorite go-tos almost every single day. But as we know, Twitter warriors, not my term, but it's too easy to hide behind a keyboard and call you a clown or call you a goat or call you whatever, burn your house down mentality. How do you stay above the fray? How does and this would be you maybe giving advice to young authors, young journalists, those who want to get into the industry. How do you not get mired down into all of that ridiculousness that, especially on Twitter, is there all the time?
Yeah, it's hard. And I'm just really happy that Twitter wasn't around when I was younger.
Yeah.
I was like, I started my Twitter account, I guess 12 or 13 years ago when I started, I think when I started covering, it was either the Gators. So I used to work for the Miami Herald and I covered the Florida Gators and then I covered the Miami Heat. So I guess I started my Twitter account when I was covering when I was covering the Gators, so I was already older. Like my advice for younger people, like there's this expression, like, don't eat the trash, like don't respond to anybody, like if they're just trying to bring you down to their level or whatever, because these are like these are anonymous accounts. Okay. Like, so I view it as like nothing you say matters because you have zero accountability. All right. Like absolutely none. Like you're a non-person essentially. If you're anonymous Twitter account, just like saying whatever, saying all these trollish things or whatever. So definitely keep that in mind. I say definitely keep that in mind. Like, people who are on Twitter and they don't identify themselves and they hide behind, anonymous accounts. I mean, are they even really people? No, they're not, because people don't act that way normally. So you lose a lot of you're just like devoiding yourself of humanity. All right. Like you're separating yourself from what, is supposed to make us human, in that sense. So yeah, I mean, Twitter, it's ridiculous. So I try to have fun with it. And, I definitely don't eat the trash.
Well,
Sometimes I do. Okay.
Well, I love the fact that you play along with it to a certain extent by putting a clown emoji or something up there, or your avatar, those things. But I think they just want a response. They just want to see if they get to you.
No.
And my thought, and tell me if you think that this is a decent mindset, is if you don't give them the platform by responding, if you don't respond, they don't have a platform to then engage you or further their agenda, which gets you off of your game.
Well, here's the thing, though. I mean, I do appreciate the readers, and I really on Twitter, I really do engage with people because I consider that part of my job as our columnist.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I get to editorialize with my job. It's not something that a lot of journalists have the opportunity to do. So, as our column writer, I really feel like it's part of my job to interact with the public. And, that means anonymous trolls, sometimes too on Twitter. So, I always just try to like have a lot of fun with it and, just make it as ridiculous as possible. People, I joke a lot. There's a lot of humor in my columns, and there's a lot of humor in things I write on Twitter. And there's always this element that is just gonna like never take a joke, like never ever gonna take a joke the way it does. And so when people do that, I really like to lean into that, and then like just add on the jokes, So
Well, that is certainly a way to enjoy, at least to a certain extent, the Twitter world. But don't eat the trash. Don't eat the trash. Joseph, thank you so much, bud, for spending some time today. I have thoroughly enjoyed learning a little bit about your journey and the behind the scenes, and we are definitely looking forward to not only the update on the current book, We Want Bama, but whatever your next project entails. So thank you.
I'm flying to Tampa tomorrow for the SEC basketball tournament.
Excellent. Excellent. Guys, if you don't follow Joe, if you don't follow him on Twitter, if you don't have him bookmarked on al.com, you're missing out. You really are. So
yeah,
again, thank you for spending some time. And as we do, as I say every week, it's interesting conversations with people in their areas of expertise, and Joseph's passion is just overflowing, guys. So thank you again, and we will catch you guys next week. Take care.
All right.